Hey everyone, welcome to the RTS Guided Program and Coaching Call. I'm Mike Tushir. I've got a good call planned for you today. You guys sent in a bunch of questions, so we're going to jump right into it, get into getting these questions answered. The first one up is kind of a long question, so I'm just going to read it out to you. This one says, I squatted 152 for 4 reps at an 8 last week. That gives me an estimated 1 rep max of 182. My protocol for this week is 6 reps at an 8. For this workout, my goal weight would be 145 for 6 at an 8 and give me a estimated 1 rep max of 184. I go to the gym and it's one of those days when everything is heavy and I hit 137 for 6 at 8, giving me an estimated 1 rep max of 174. For the following week, as the goal weight, do I aim to beat 182 or do I lower my expectations to try to improve on the 174? Same applies if I have an amazing workout and so on. So let me break out my notepad here, and I think that will be a better way to highlight this question. So stand by just 1 second. So the old trusty notepad. All right. So you said in week 1 you did 152.5 for 4 reps at 8 RPE, and that led to an estimated 1 rep max of 182. And then in the following week, you're supposed to do 6 reps at 8 RPE. So when you calculated what your goal weight should be based off of the previous estimated 1 rep max, which was 182, you came to the conclusion that you needed 145 for 6 at an 8, which all makes sense. And that would give you an estimated 1 rep max of 184. But then you said when you actually went to the gym that day, it is one of those days when everything went heavy, and what actually happened, we didn't make it all the way to 145. It was 137.5 for 6 at an 8, and that means that your estimated 1 rep max was in fact 174. So the question is, so we have this next week coming up. You have training scheduled. So the question is, do we aim for the 182 or do we aim for the 174? That's a good question. For our purposes, I think you should generally aim for 174. And then if things feel good, then you can scale it up to the 182. So let's say, for example, I'm gonna borrow from your previous example so I can save on some math. Let's say that you're scheduled to do 6 reps at 8 RPE again. So we're going to aim at 174, which means that our target weight's going to be 137.5. So your workup sets might be something along the lines of, let's see, 115 for 6 at a 6, and then you might do 125 for 6, and maybe that's only 6.5. Well, in this case, we know that you're feeling pretty good that day, so you might go up from there. You might go to 140 or maybe 142, depending. That would be a pretty big jump, so probably more on the 140 side. On the other hand, if 125 for 6 is not 6.5 RPE, if it's not feeling easy, if it's kind of on target, then you'll do 137.5. You might scale it up a little bit to 140, just to feel it out and see what's there. So that's kind of the idea, is that you'll scale your workload depending on your performance, but you're going to base this target weight off of your most recent performance. Now, if it's just kind of a weird day, it's a bad day, you don't really know why, you don't think it's going to repeat, it's not a trend that you see, like it's just kind of this one blip, it doesn't show up in your assistance work, it doesn't do anything else, then you can kind of split the difference. So maybe instead of, so your goal weight from 182, if you were basing your goal weight off of 182, the goal weight's 142. If you base your goal weight off of 174, it's 137. So maybe you could split the difference, make your goal weight 140 for 6 out of 8. That way when you do 115, or even you scale that up a little bit too, so you could go to 120 for 6 out of 6, and then you do 130 for 6. Now if this one is heavier than normal, say 7.5, then you'll scale it back. You'll go to 137 again. But if it's on par, then you'll stick to the plan and go to 140. If it's easier than normal, then you'll jump back up and go for a PR possibly. So I hope that makes sense. I hope you kind of see how you can flesh that out and how you can mess around with this to make it work for you. You also ask a question in here. Same rule applies if you have a particularly amazing workout and your estimated 1 rep max finishes up at say 190. Do you continue to try to improve on 190? How do you deal with these days and the working weights that follow? It's basically the same process. If it's just an incremental improvement, then of course you just go with it. If it's kind of an anomaly, you know, you have this big improvement all at once and you're not really sure why or where it came from, then yeah, of course, do the same process. You know, use it to temper your expectations. You know, if you have a really amazing session, then you'll kind of do the same process. Maybe you'll split the difference. Maybe you'll err a bit on the side of caution, but give yourself an opportunity to take what's there. That's the idea, is that on any given week, you can put yourself in a position to hit the RPEs that you need. All right, so let's see about moving on to the next question here. All right, next question says, so I squatted 330 for a single a few weeks ago, and that was a true 1 rep max. So looking at the chart for priority 1, I find 3 reps and find a 9 RPE. That corresponds roughly to 89% of my 1 rep max. So it would look like 79% for triple, 84% for triple, 89% for triple, correct? Yes, that is correct. So what you're asking in this question is basically just verifying that you understand the determining working weights document correctly. Yes, you do seem to understand it correctly. The second half of this question says, for drop sets, I take 5% off from the top set. How many reps do I do? You do the same number of reps. So again, let me bring my notepad back up here. All right, so your goal weight is to do 3 reps at a 9. So that's why your workup is triple at 7, triple at 8, triple at 9. So when you're placing target weights on those, 79% for triple, 84% for triple, and then 89% for triple. Granted, those are just target weights. If the RPEs are abnormal, they won't be exactly 7, 8, and 9, but they should be fairly close. So if the RPEs are abnormal in any way for you, then you need to adjust that top weight, because what you're trying to do for this top weight is to create a triple at a 9 RPE. So it's important to have that adjustment. Now, when you take 5% of the weight off the bar, you go, you're doing your drop work. Now you go back to 84%. You keep doing triples for the required number of down sets. Now the second half of your question relates to doing singles. So if the protocol requires a single at 8, single at 9, and then triple at 9, how do you do this? So of course the single is going to be heavier than the triple. You do the single, you work up to your single at 9 RPE, so it's going to be, say, 90% for one at 8, then 95% for one at a 9, then you're going to drop back down to 89% for triple at a 9. So that's generally what you'll see. And now at this point, when you do the drop sets, you're going to continue doing rep work. So say you drop 5 more percent, so you go to 84% for triples. So hopefully that makes sense. We can work through a bit of an example, and hopefully that highlights a bit more of how to go through the determining working weights portion. All right. So now that that's out of the way, let's talk a little bit about program modifications. These are questions that center more around how to modify the program so that it fits your needs, so that it targets your weaknesses, things like that, fits your schedule. So first question up for program modification says, if certain parts felt weak, lack of muscle, like chest, quads, glutes, should we do accessory bodybuilding compounds to increase the muscularity and activation of those muscles? So I'm assuming that you're talking about basically adding in additional bodybuilding work. I don't think that you need to do that. In fact, I don't want you to do that for the most part. There are some specific instances where we've talked about in the past where that's appropriate, but without having one of those specific instances, I don't think you should do it. So some times that we've talked about that in the past are basically when people are not interested in pure strength. If your goal is strength, then let the goal be the goal. So for those of you who maybe feel like you don't have enough muscle mass, adding additional bodybuilding work, it'll get you additional volume on those muscles, but it also comes at a cost. The cost is in recovery. The cost is in time spent. Basically, if you have additional time and recovery energy, that time will be better spent doing heavier lifting. If you don't have time or recovery energy, then you would be better off not doing it. Also, keep in mind that it's not just time and recovery energy that are in play. This is a life cycle plan. So the whole system is designed to walk you through the life cycle of a lifter. We want to develop you. We want to develop you as a lifter. We don't want to shortchange you in the long run. So that's why we have the level of work that we have, because we're trying to create appropriate effects. We don't want you to work yourself into the ground as a novice, because what do you do when you're an advanced lifter? There's nowhere else for you to go. So I'm not able to come at this as clearly as I would like, just based on the constraints of answering this question in a timely fashion. What I would recommend that you do is go back and look at past coaching calls via the forum. Look for things like long-term planning. Look for things like periodization. Try to learn about why the volume for these programs is structured the way that it is. Try to learn about the long-term design of these programs. I think that that's going to really help you in terms of understanding where we're going with this, and it'll also help you understand why I'm recommending that you don't add in additional bodybuilding work. So kind of a long answer to that. The easy explanations are more in the realm of time and recovery. But that's not always an issue for people. Even when it's not an issue, it's still important to stick to the workloads that we recommend, because they're recommended that way for a reason. All right, next question up says, I was wondering if I could substitute the touch and go bench, 3-count pause bench, or the 2-board press with the competition raw bench, since I'm now training in gear. Also, would it do any good if I did this for the squat, or will the stress from squatting be too much? Yes, you can make this substitution. So you're training in equipment, so your primary movement each week is the shirted bench press. So you have an interest in maintaining and developing your raw bench press. I feel the same way whenever I'm doing equipped lifting, so I can relate. What I would recommend is that you substitute the touch and go bench for a competition raw bench and just let it be. I don't think you need any additional substitutions beyond that. That should suffice. The squat's a bit different because there's not as many slots available for squatting. So for bench, we have, depending on the program that you have, around 6 movements each week that are targeted at the bench press. The squat gets 3 and the deadlift gets 3. So there's not as much room for playing around with the squat. I will tell you that you can add in competition raw squatting sometimes. Let's say every other week. That would be fine, but we don't want to totally neglect the special exercises for the squat either. So I would rather you didn't make that substitution every single week. If you make it every other week or less, then you get a nice balance. But I do appreciate the feeling that you have, and I see where you're coming from for sure. It's not too much stress to do the same type of thing with squatting. It's just a matter of time, and it's just a trade-off. So to add in extra competition squatting, something has to give. You know, whether that's recovery energy, if we're just going to add it on top, but in general, most of the time we have to pull something out of the program, which means that we're not getting that benefit anymore. So that's why I make that recommendation. We want to keep the overall workload balanced because we want to keep your stress and your recovery within tolerances. So you can make that substitution sometimes, and that kind of gives you the best of all the worlds. Next question up says, for now, I don't plan on doing singles in the gear unless the protocol asks me to, since I am accustomed to using the gear. But when I'm 4 weeks out from competition, should I start implementing the singles at 7 and 8 before doing rep work at 9, along with the following down sets? Will this be okay even if it drastically decreases my volume in gear? First of all, in response to this question, I don't think it's a good idea to wait on the singles. I think that when you're performing reps in the gear, it's easy for the technique to get sloppy, and technique and equipment is very important. It's hard to squat to depth for a set of 5 if you're wearing a squat suit and knee wraps. It's hard. You know, I've done it before. So what generally happens is guys cut the reps a little bit high because there's so many of them, and the focus is on moving the weight, which I understand, but you still need to get some technical practice in, which is why I recommend the singles. So do the singles, do them anyway. Even if you're far away from your competition, do the singles. In the early stages, if you only want to do the single at 8 RPE, that's fine. In the later stages, I want to see you doing singles at 8, singles at 9, and then your rep work. The reason is that the single itself gets you a nice training effect. It gets you exposure to very heavy weights. It gets you used to performing lifts to competition standard. It's going to help you a ton in competition. I know that you say that you're accustomed to using gear, but I mean, I trained in gear exclusively, competed in gear exclusively for several years, actually from about 2004 to 2009, so about 5 years of exclusive gear work and training, and I still needed that weekly exposure to equipment. Now, I didn't know about singles for a great portion of that time, but I think that's a better way to go about doing this. It's better technique practice. It's just better overall exposure. Keep doing the singles. Still do the rep work, but that allows you to focus on to make the focus of rep work on getting strong. Keep technical practice in place as well. So as far as it drastically decreasing your volume, it will decrease your volume. I don't think it will be drastic since we're only using the equipment once a week. You're only basically reducing by 2 sets. And we're generally keeping the reps fairly low, so you're talking about missing 5 to 8 total repetitions per week due to the singles, and then you have so much better transfer from the high intensity singles. So I don't think that the volume reduction from this one modification is going to be a problem. That said, wouldn't you much rather know about it 10 or 12 weeks out rather than 4 weeks out? I mean, if you're 10 or 12 weeks out, you still have time to do something about it. That's why I recommend that you do the singles now. At the same time, if it's working well, if you're building your momentum, you can continue to make small course corrections and continue to improve your results as you go into competition. All right, next up we've got a scheduling question or two. So let's see, this question says, if possible, could I adjust my peaking date? I'm not competing again until December. I need to fill out my weight category and get a proper off season. I'm having quite a lot of difficulty managing the fatigue as I'm not used to high training loads. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. There's a lot going on with this question, so I'm going to kind of break it down into parts. The first part is gaining weight. You're trying to fill out your weight class. I'm going to tell you some things that you probably already know, but we're just going to make sure that everybody's on an even footing here. Gaining weight is primarily going to come from your nutrition. You've got to make sure that you're eating enough calories in order for the scale weight to go up. As far as making most of that weight turn into muscle, which is what we want, we need to make sure that there's a sufficient training stimulus. We got to make sure that the training volume is high enough to stimulate muscle hypertrophy so that you're adding mostly muscle and not an excess amount of fat. The high training loads and the high frequencies that you're seeing in this program are going to help you with that. It's something that's going to help drive the increase in muscle mass. So provided that you're taking care of the nutritional piece, I would expect to see that your body composition, you're able to add muscle mass at a good rate, especially considering that we're balancing that with strength production. We don't want to go 100% bodybuilder mode because, yeah, you would fill out your weight class, but it wouldn't necessarily be efficient. It wouldn't necessarily be efficient muscle that's ready and able to produce high force. So we're going to balance that out, and that's why I think the current training loading is going to be good for you. You don't necessarily need like a bodybuilder off season. I don't think that's going to be especially productive for you. Second thing going on in your question here is about managing fatigue. You said that you're having difficulty managing that fatigue. So again, I'm going to tell you some things that you probably already know. The first thing is make sure that you're using track. Track will auto-regulate your program based on how you're responding to it. So if things are going well, track will add volume to your program. If you're not recovering well, if you're feeling fatigued and worn down, track will reduce the volume of your program. So it's a really good tool to help you manage and fine-tune your program so that it fits your needs and abilities. Now, if you're constantly feeling beat up and you're constantly having this problem of not being able to manage your fatigue, then let me know, because while track can make these course corrections, we don't want to rely on that long term. If it's a constant thing that you're always feeling beat up, then let me know and I'll move you to a different group that has a training load that's more suitable for your recovery ability. Now, your recovery ability is something that will improve over time. You're going to make that adaptation, and then we will increase the volume when you're able to tolerate it. But for now, I think that fatigue management piece is something that If we're talking small corrections, track is capable of handling it. If it's a bigger correction that needs to be made, get in touch with me and we can see about moving you to a different group. Now, this whole question really hinges on this concept of off-season / annual planning. So we talked a little bit about this a few minutes ago, so let's go into a little bit more depth on it. So the way that we do long-term planning for RTS, we have different, you can think of them as seasons in training. Early on, we have the early half of the year, and then we divide the year into two parts. There's the early half and then there's the late half. The whole idea is this annual plan leads you into the most important competition of the year. So the whole year gears you up for the biggest competition of your year. And there are other peaks within the year, of course, but they all sort of build you into this direction. And then it becomes cyclic, that after this year is over, then we kind of reset everything and build you into the next year, just like the seasons. So early on in the training year, you're going to see more stuff that it'll be closer to what you would typically think of as a powerlifting off season. There will be more exercise variations. There will be less intensity. You're reestablishing your work capacity in that early phase. Then after that early phase, you go into the early competition phase, which is where you get your first real big peak of the year. And this is supposed to be around the halfway point. So what you'll see during this stage, you'll see higher intensities. You'll still see quite a bit of variety. More variety than you'll see at other times of the year, at least. And this will lead you into a competition form, competition peak. After that first competition peak, we go into the late half of the year, so late preparation phase. Late preparation phase is characterized by a real big push for volume. The exercise selection gets more specific, so we start to reduce the number of exercises that we're doing and hone them in towards something more specific. We still train weaknesses, but we're really pushing volume, really developing your work capacity to something very high. Then there's the late competition phase, where we really focus everything again on the most important competition peak of the year. The weights get heavier, the volume is still high, but the focus is on doing things that we can do to help you tolerate that volume. So things like passive recovery modalities and stuff like that. So we're trying to help you tolerate this high volume, although the volume has to adjust and auto-regulate to suit the intensity that we're bringing to the table in this phase. You'll see a lot more heavy weights. The exercise selection is still very specific, but again, this is supposed to bring you into the biggest peak, the best shape, the best form of your competition year. And then after that, we'll have a transition phase, and then we go back into the annual plan. So this annual plan becomes cyclic. The idea, though, is that each year you should gain in strength. You should be better than the year before, and you should develop as a lifter and so on. So what will happen in the context of in the context of guided programming is that at the end of the year, you'll be in a different stage than you were in the beginning. So you'll probably be placed into a different group, which will have different training baselines, and then you'll repeat the process. So it will develop you as a lifter from one year to the next as well. So we have planning at all these different stages. Of course, there's the weekly plans, there's the monthly plans that we have, and this is stuff that you guys are much more familiar with. But this is all part of a bigger picture. It's part of a training cycle plan, which is part of an annual plan, which is part of a multi-year plan. This is all designed to develop you as a lifter and to help peak you for competition, throughout your career. Got a track question this week. This question says, I'm on a deload this week, but track is recommending that I add extra volume. Should I listen? Yes, you should listen. Track is responding to your functional state. It's responding to your ability to recover, how much stress are you carrying, how well are you tolerating that stress. If it's a deload week and track is telling you to add volume, that's because you're handling the workload very well. So you can take more volume and still be in this functional state that we want you to be in. And if you add a little bit of volume in this session and it throws things into a tailspin, well, track is going to see that, recognize it, and correct that as well. So but we almost never see that happen. Usually things are part of more slow moving trends. So if track is seeing this and telling you to add a little bit more volume, it's probably because you can handle it and that your recovery is going to be fine even if you include a little bit more volume. There are no GPP questions this week. All right, so let's take on a few miscellaneous type questions. This first one up says, I've got a mild low back strain. I also have a meet in 2 weeks. How should I manage this? Again, as I've said in the past, I can't really give you advice on rehab because that's pretty well outside of my domain of expertise. But what I can tell you is if your back strain is better and you're able to get back to training, you're able to reintroduce to training, you have a meet in 2 weeks. That's touchy. If it's an unimportant meet and you don't really care about it that much, I would consider maybe passing on the meet, finding a meet that's a few weeks later. That could help you out a lot. If it's a more important meet or for whatever reason you don't want to pass on this meet, what you can do is follow the reintroduction protocol that I've laid out in the past. Now, the one that I've laid out in the past is about 4 weeks long. It starts at 15%, then 30%, then 45%, then 60%, and then return to normal training. Well, you don't have that long since you've got a meet in 2 weeks. Again, this is all contingent on you being healed and able to tolerate this sort of work. What you would do then is you would work up as heavy as you reasonably could. So for this first week, you would start to work up slowly. Make sure that you're paying close attention, and I mean slowly. So probably 15% for your first set, and you're gradually adding weight. You'll probably take about 10 sets to work up to 50%. Each set that you do, they will be really easy, because you're only doing 8 to 10 reps per set. So each set that you do, you're feeling for that injury. Do you feel anything? Yes, no, well, yeah, it hurts. If it hurts, then you shut it down. If it feels weird, like, well, it doesn't quite hurt, but I can still feel that, my low back is not real happy with what I'm doing. If it feels weird like that, then you shut it down. If you're 2 weeks out, if you're any weeks out, it doesn't matter. You're dealing with an injury, the first priority is to avoid re-injury. You have to avoid re-injury in order to heal. So it would be better to shut it down a little bit too early than too late. If you shut it down too late, then you have to start the healing process over again. So take your time, work back into it. But basically what you're doing is trying to condense the normal reintroduction phase into a shorter time block, which that might work, provided that you're healed up enough to tolerate it. If you're not healed up enough to tolerate it, then I would pass on the meet. It would be better to skip the meet than to do it and suffer a more severe injury. All right, this next question, it's a bit long, but it contains a lot of good information, so I'm going to read it out for you. It says, I'm in the 8th week of a gradual cut, losing about 1/2 to 1.5% of body weight per week. I've lost a total of close to 10 pounds at this point. I'm looking at going from a body fat in the high teens to the low teens. Recently, my squat and deadlift have taken a hit. My pressing has been okay, but I attribute that to how low it was to begin with and the technical improvements I've recently made. I have sent a few emails with photos of my training log to check and see if this is what would be expected in my situation, and to also see if I'm adjusting the workouts accordingly when RPE is higher on my workup sets than anticipated. Also, I have to test my lifts soon, and I'm wondering if I should do a gym test if my lifts are headed downward. I've been trying as best I can to maintain strength, but it seems inevitable that I lose some while cutting. As I've mentioned in the past, my goals are aesthetic as well as strength-oriented, which I find very challenging at times. Any advice on how to manage these expectations would be greatly appreciated. Okay, first of all, thanks for the question. Second of all, I'm assuming that you've lost about 8% of your total body weight at this point. You said that you've lost 1/2 to 1.5% per week. You've lost about 10 pounds total. I'm going to assume that that's about 8% of your total body weight. That's significant, and that's enough that it's going to start affecting your strength. So part of it is, yeah, it's just the weight loss. So there's some things that, that's, for better or worse, we just can't do a lot about. But we're going to do our best to minimize that. Okay, so keep adjusting your training weights based on performance. That's something that you're already doing. We talked about that earlier in the coaching call as well. So if you haven't already, go back and review that. Make sure that you understand how to adjust those training weights, and that will be something that's helpful for you. As far as whether or not you should do the gym test, I would do it if you feel like doing it. I mean, it is just a gym test, so do it or don't do it. I mean, it's however you feel. But the deload week should remain. You should still taper down. You should still do all of that stuff as if you're going to do the gym test, because it's an important part of the overall plan. We need these periods of lower volume. We need these periods of stress reduction. So still do the taper, still do the deload portion, but whether or not you actually do the gym test, in a situation like yours, it's up to you. I would say the exposure to heavy weights is important and it's potentially helpful, but also I understand that when the weights are moving downward, that's difficult psychologically, even if you know that that's supposed to be happening. So it may not be worth the trade-off. If you're like, I just really don't feel like seeing how bad my strength has gotten. First of all, you might be beating yourself up too much about it. May not be that big of a deal. But if it's going to bother you, then skip the gym test. As far as managing your expectations, make sure that one little trick that I've come across that can help you is to monitor your Wilks score. If you look at your Wilks from when you were heavier and then you look at your Wilks now that you're lighter, hopefully you see that your Wilks is the same or improving, and that's kind of positive feedback for you. That's showing you that, hey, for your body weight you are getting stronger. So I would check that out. Monitor your Wilks score and see how you're doing. If your Wilks score is going backwards, then maybe we should think about goals. I know that your goals are part aesthetic and part strength, and that is difficult to manage both at the same time, but it can be done. So take a look at your Wilks score. That might be a nice little psychological boost for you. Let me know what you find out. Also, don't let your body fat get out of hand. Going from high teens to low teens is tough. It would be better to go from maybe mid-teens to low teens, or maybe 14% to around 10-11%. That's a transition that's more manageable. It's easier for you. It's easier on your body. So if you can kind of keep your body fat in check most of the time, I think you'll be better off. Also, keep your cutting periods small and keep the total amount of weight cut small. If you can cut, a small amount, maintain it for a while, and then let your body stabilize there, and then maybe cut again, I think you'll feel better about it. I think you'll have better results overall from it. So I'm not, I'm not going to tell you how to run your bodybuilding side of the program, but those are some strategies that I've come across that I think would be helpful for a person in your position. All right, at this point, we're going to switch over and do some video review. So let's take a look. First up, we're going to take a look at Scott's squat. We've got a squat here to take a look at. The thing that we're looking for, general form check, weakness analysis, and RPE check. So I'll play the video and let you guys take a look, and then I'll share my thoughts. All right, let's watch that one more time. Maybe, if the video wants to load for me. All right, while we're waiting for the video to load again, I'll just kind of share some of my thoughts. As far as your technique goes, it's not bad. I think you're past the point of really needing a lot of technical corrections. It's just a bunch of general refinement stuff. Keep squatting, keep trying to be more efficient, so try to make your moves more precisely, try to get in position faster, try to basically wiggle less. I know that that's vague, and that's not something that you do right now. This is something that will evolve and it'll take shape naturally. Even if you don't intentionally try to do it, it'll take shape naturally over the years. It does take a long time to develop movement mastery, but like I said, you're past the point of like needing these little, technical corrections like, hey, do this first, do that first. You're squatting well, so you don't need a lot of form check stuff going on. Keep squatting and keep trying to refine it and make it a more precise movement. As far as weaknesses go, your weakness was definitely at the bottom of the movement, which is typical and also ideal for a raw lifter. That's where your weakness should be. That's also one of the easier weaknesses to address in terms of squatting. So no surprises there. That's what we want to see as well. RPE check. You said that this was an RPE 10 lift. I generally agree. I thought it was an RPE 10. I thought if you had said 9.5, I wouldn't have argued with you, but it definitely wasn't below that. So I think your RPEs are fair. One question that I have for you is something that you said in your email. You said, I called it a 10 RPE since I missed at 375. So my assumption here is, so this is 365, so my assumption is that you did another set after this at 375 and missed, and since that was a miss, therefore this 365 is a 10 RPE. I understand why that would make sense logically, but just try not to do that. Make sure that you're judging RPE on its own. Try not to revise it after the fact. So if you did this lift and you were like, man, I smoked that. That was a 9 RPE, and then you missed the next one, don't go back and revise this RPE, because your perception at the time was a 9 RPE, and that's important. And we don't want to go back and just revise this stuff because we might be wrong about it. Now, revise your judgments next time. Make sure that you're trying to learn from this and get better at it over time. but don't go back and revise the stuff that you've already done. So I do think you're correct that this was a 10 RPE, maybe 9.5. You know, so there's a couple issues at play. So you went up to 375 and missed. Well, it could have been technical. It could have been energetic. It could have been, for example, you burned some energy when you did 365. This was clearly not an easy lift. So maybe if you had gone straight to 375, you would have made it. I don't know. But that's part of the reason why it's important to judge RPE based on its own, so we can sort of see those things. If we see a pattern emerge that, hey, you know, you've basically got one big single, you know, so if you do one at a 9.5, then you need to be really conservative on your next attempt or something like that, you know, so we can sort of see these trends. We can get a better assessment on how you perform as a lifter if you're more honest about the RPE. And maybe honesty is not the right word. It's just kind of a technique for making sure that you get the RPE assessment correct. The other question I have for you is whether or not you added this as an extra session of singles, or whether this was in your intended program. I'm just not quite clear based on how your email was worded. I don't want to see you adding extra sessions of singles or extra sessions of, you know, primary mover work, really, if we can help it. In general, you know, the program is written and the volumes are prescribed in the way that they are for a reason. So we don't want to add a whole bunch of stuff on top of that. All right, next video up is another squat video. We're going to do technique and weakness analysis on this one. So let me back this up. All right. So technique and weakness analysis. I'll go ahead and let you guys watch this video. All right. As you mentioned in your video, or in your email rather, it was a little bit high at the bottom. That happens. You've got plenty of strength. It just looks like the issue for you is more comfortability. That will come with more squatting. As you squat a lot, you'll get better at it and more comfortable with it. You'll be able to descend a bit quicker. I would work on descent speed during your normal sessions, and as you improve, as you get better at descent speed, that will transition into your heavier weights as well. So I think a lot of it's this comfortability issue. Also, I know that there's some technical stuff going on as far as you changing your grip width and stuff like that, which is fine. That will settle given a little bit of time. Make sure that you're working on refining those movements. You know, get to your walkout, get your feet set, and try not to take a lot of extraneous steps if you can help it. Any energy that you can save is a good thing. As far as weaknesses go, your weak range of motions at the bottom of the lift, that makes sense. That's going to be something that's going to be addressed heavily with this style of programming. So I think you're pretty well suited. You're in a good spot for this kind of programming. All right, next up, we're going to watch this deadlift here. Let's watch this deadlift. The question here is whether this is too much backgrounding or not. So go ahead and let you guys watch. Okay, one more time. Let's see if I can stop it at the right spot. Okay. All right, this is not very much backgrounding, but I guess it depends on what you're after. you do round a little bit under load, and that's bad. You can see that you start out very flat, and then as you start to pull, your back rounds a bit, and that's not good. I would recommend that you try to start in that position, this position that we're looking at right now. See if you can start in that position, unless there's a reason that you're trying to avoid that. I know that we've looked at your videos in the past, but I'm having trouble recalling offhand whether you're a round back puller that's trying to change or not. But in general, this is not bad. The only time I would have a problem with it is if you're like a recovering round back puller, and at that point, basically any flexion under load is reinforcing a bad habit. So this looks fine unless you're trying to change to a different style, in which case you would need to be a little bit more strict about things, I guess. All right, and then the last video that we've got, we're gonna watch this one here. We're looking at technique for this one, in particular stuff about stance width and shoes, like which shoes should I be wearing, stuff like that. So let's check this one out and we'll see what we see. Okay, I paused that hopefully close to the bottom, and here's kind of another angle. Okay. All right, so we're looking at technique for this one. First thing that I see, you're a little bit high in this side shot video. I don't know if that's typical for you or not, but it's just something to be aware of. Yeah, something to be aware of and possibly work on. Your stance width seems okay from what I see. If you were to narrow up your stance, you would have more forward lean. I'm not sure that that's the best thing for you, so I think your stance width is fine. I can't see your shoes in either of these videos, so I'm not entirely sure what shoes that you've got on, but your mechanics seem okay. What I would recommend is that you try some in flat shoes and then you try some in heeled shoes, take a video of both and differentiate them, and then see which one results in better mechanics. That will be a way for you to kind of custom tell whether the heel or the flat works better for you. And then for anybody who wants to try that and doesn't have heeled shoes and trying to figure out whether you should spring for them and buy those, you can use flat shoes and just put a small plate under your heels, like a 10-pound plate or something. That will give you enough of a heel lift that you can see what the effect is going to be without dropping all the money for a pair of heeled shoes. Of course, heeled shoes are going to be better than just having a plate under your heels, but a plate is free, or at least no additional cost to you, and it's available right now, and it's a good enough solution to see whether it's worth pursuing any further. So things look fine as far as your technique. The only thing is going to be really about depth. And for you, I think that's just going to be, you seem like you've got plenty of mobility, plenty of flexibility to get there. I think it's just going to be a matter of doing it. All right, so that does it for our videos. Let me head back over here so you guys can check out our pictures. All right, so just explanation time. I've got one question here that says, I feel weaker when I pull from the floor or from the rack than I do when I pull from the deficit. Is that due to a starting position or a lack of leg drive when I pull from the floor or the rack? Good question. It's hard to diagnose just via the words that you use here. Sometimes we do see that where people are better at pulling from a deficit than they are pulling from the floor. It happens. I wouldn't worry about it a whole lot. I would practice your craft pulling from the floor. It could be a leg drive thing. It could be a tightness thing. It could just be that you're better at getting tight from that deficit position, and that helps you to transfer it over to the full range of motion deadlift better. So yeah, it's hard to tell why, but I think the important thing is just that you practice your craft. So if you want to get better at pulling from the floor, we're going to obviously spend most of our time pulling from the floor. It's kind of like a floor press. Some people can do more weight for a floor press than they can in a full range of motion bench, and other people can't. I'm not sure it's a big deal. Just because that's an observation that we can make doesn't necessarily mean it's signal. It could just be noise. It doesn't mean that we necessarily have to do anything about it. It might not indicate a specific weakness and so on. So it's an interesting observation. If you had some video of both, we might be able to get closer to finding out why. But in the end, I'm not sure it's going to make much difference. I can't imagine a reason why that's going to drive big changes to your programming. Let's see. So just want to, before I wrap things up here, I just want to have a quick shout out to James. James had a competition last weekend, and just want to say congrats on his recent meet performance and his first 400 plus Wilks. So congrats, James. I know that you really trained hard and you really put in a lot of hard work for that. So congrats to you and your new set of PRs. So that's really about all I've got for you guys this week. As always, just want to say thanks for watching. Next week's call, I'm traveling to Finland for the World Championship on Monday, so I will have to reschedule it. It won't be on Monday, but it will be next week, and provided that the internet in Finland is satisfactory, which I'm sure that it will be fine, we'll get that call up for you guys earlier next week. With that said, yeah, that should be everything. So good luck this week. Good luck with your training. Remember to take what's there and build some momentum. We'll see you guys next time.